Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Peter Obi is one man who, through his words and actions, has always given the impression that Nigeria can attain the level of economic revolution or transformation that occurred in China more than 70 years ago, even without the socialist trappings that trailed the Chinese experience. During the last elections in Nigeria, the former governor of Anambra State and vice presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party took this message everywhere on the campaign trail. And on the night of a televised vice presidential debate, he delivered what many economic watchers called a thought-provoking performance, which in the weeks that followed defined discourse in both the capital and financial markets. But how much of that registered at the upper echelons of economic decision-making? Probably not much, as everything at the time was practically tied to partisan politics. The good thing is that this morning, we have him right here with us for a detailed discussion about the economy, politics, and a lot more. Welcome to the program.
Welcome to the program.
Good morning.
Yes, you're
Thank
welcome
you for
to the...
inviting me.
Yes,
you for
and thank you for always honoring our invitation.
Thank you.
But quickly, let's start with politics.
Politics?
Yes, politics. I mean,
no.
your party...
We are putting a lot onto politics.
Your party lost at a presidential election petition tribunal, and you've gone to the Supreme Court. But even after that, weeks after, the government of the day seems to have woken up, gathered momentum, and Nigerians seem to have moved on. It looks like it's just you and your principal that are still, fighting in the courts. Are you still optimistic that a miracle will happen, if I may use that word?
Well, I'll just say I will opt to be silent on that, but let me ever tell you, whenever you think things are wrong, challenge it conclusively. That's all I'll say about it. It all helps to build tomorrow when you challenge things that were wrong or rascality or anything. I'm somebody who have always believed that we need to challenge and fight because it will help to correct tomorrow.
And that's fair.
It's in court, so I won't make comment on it.
No, but I'm asking about your optimism.
Well, as always, I wake up every morning with a sense of things being better.
No, not being better. Do you still hope to win?
Of course, yes, because I have a case. But as I said, it's in court. Let's leave the things that are in court. It is even things that are bigger and worse than that happening to the nation and everything. But we are we are sure of what we're doing.
So let's discuss the state of the nation, starting right from the crux of the elections, actually, and how, away from the PEPT, away from the election tribunal, how you genuinely feel towards the electoral process in Nigeria and how it's working for us. What kind of electoral reform do you want us to see going ahead so that the ills of the 2019 elections, that some people believe were, and some others may argue weren't, are ills that we can avoid seeing again in the future?
I can tell you that the whole thing is a mess, and we need to correct it. The process of election is critical. You see, in this country, what we fail to understand that the process is far more fundamental than anything. It's not just process of election, process through which people come into office, which any office, whether it's private, corporate, public, it is important that we follow the process. Like I always tell people, I'm a Catholic. So if I want to be a Catholic priest, I would have gone to the seminary. And from there, they can promote me to bishop and then probably to cardinal. In Nigeria, it is possible that I can wake up tomorrow and become a bishop of a Catholic church. There's a process of being that. The same thing, if you want to be a governor, a local government chairman, a president, anything, there's a process. If you get the process right, you will see that it will impact a lot on what people do here. The reason why people we're going through what we're going through today and seeing so much rascality is because the process is faulty. So I can afford to say, oh, I'm owing 1 year's salary and I'm seeking second term. You can't do it anywhere in the world. You'll be begging to be allowed to go freely for the one you're doing. But here, because the process is faulty, because I know I'm going to rig the process, because I know I'm going to manipulate the process, I'm even saying it arrogantly. You now see a situation where a governor is owing salary and he's spraying money in the public, even throwing money to people from his car. And people, nobody's saying anything. And that is why you're going through what you're going through now. Very difficult situation.
No, but if I may ask you, I mean, after the 2019 general election, even INEC was saying a lot about electoral reform. They've not come up with details. Yeah. And you are just saying now that there's a problem with the process. What are those specific things that you would like the Nigerian system to change, to deepen the quality of our electoral process and to prevent rigging? Is it electronic server that should be introduced?
Frankly, like I said, I don't want to comment because it's such this. I don't want to comment a lot on issue of the electoral process. You know, I've been an election observer in Ghana. I've been an election observer in so many countries. This is that today, you don't even talk about the elections. Everybody, you know, you go to everywhere and conduct the election. I have friends all over the world. After election, you call them and say, oh, the election is free and fair, it's okay, whether it's in Brazil, whether it's anywhere, you know.
We're still on the political side of things. I mean, we've had some guests on this program. They are surprised that you are in Nigeria, you are visible, you are going everywhere, but your principal seems to have taken flight, and he's away in Dubai, and nobody has seen him in Nigeria. Ruben, is it a deliberate choice?
Ruben, we are finished.
Is he in exile?
Ruben we finish election. He has options to stay where he wants to stay. Even people in government are traveling. So
no, but what are the reasons for his isolation from the country? Because ahead of the election tribunal, he wasn't here.
It is you that is you. When he comes back, you ask him that. But I can tell you, it's a fundamental. It's one of his rights. He can be anywhere. There's no obligation that says he must be here. Just like me, there's no reason why, you know, you would say, oh, I have to be in Lagos. I have to be in this. I'm here because probably I can't afford to live outside here. Probably anything. So that's why I'm staying here. Maybe some of us are stuck. You know. So that is the thing. After all, I mean, the president's wife just came back and said he was on holidays for 1 week. He went from there to Saudi and went from back to London. You know, people who have means can move around. If you don't have means, you stay with me and Ruben in Lagos. And
but the expectation would be that a man, you know, who was presidential candidate,
but I can tell
who is fighting a battle, will stay on the ground and fight it.
No.
And not
you can always fight a battle from anywhere.
But is that the way to fight a battle of such caliber as it was? Because the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal this year was symbolic for democracy for a lot of Nigerians.
For me, let me tell you, I always say this. Nigerians are spending too much time on politics, elections, everything. It shouldn't be. We have a problem. We have huge problems that we should face. We're talking a lot about politics. When we finish that, we're going to, you know, kind of, I don't know how to put it. We should face our problem. We have a problem.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, we do. I completely agree.
And that's what we should face. Mm-hmm. Elections have come and gone. We're in court. And I respect that process until it comes to conclusion. What we should be talking now is the problems of the country.
We're talking about problems of the country. There are some people who hold the view that the PDP, as a political party, is not yet playing its role as an opposition party. What's your own impression? Is the PDP still waiting before it wakes up? Because you recall that when the PDP was in government, the APC was a very aggressive opposition party.
But the PDP is playing its part strongly as opposition party. And that I can tell you. There's no issue they've not made comment on. unfortunately in Nigeria, noise-making have become part of our politics. That's why you have people who are around speaking ABCD and all that. You know, it's become a measure of noise-making has become a measure of saying I'm doing well, or I'm in opposition, or this or that and everything. Just like we have done even ability to speak good English as intelligence, or ability to say that you went to school. Like even in court now, they say, oh, so somebody can speak English. So let's leave all that. We have a problem. Our problem is not about, even those who are in government and all those who are outside the government, there's issues that are bothering us. We have 98 million people that are living below poverty line. Ruben, politics is not going to solve their problem.
So let's speak about their policies and for solving these things,
budgets,
right?
and all that we deal with. And then we have a crisis situation.
So the social investment programs that this government have adopted and they're taking on, a huge part of that obviously has to do with curbing the situation that we have with poverty. The president came out himself to say that he wants to lift 10 million Nigerians out of poverty every single year over the next 10 years, making 100 million as a whole. What do you think about the way the SIPs have been structured? Do you really think that these are programs that can lead Nigeria to a more sustainable path and future?
With which budget? That's all I want to ask you.
Well, they have budgeted for SIPs in the 2020 allocations.
No, where's budget to do that? You have to look at it. See, let me tell you, Nigerians just look at things in the surface. We have a huge problem. And until we go back and accept that we have a problem and start dealing with our problem, and the only way you can do that is you have to look at comparative nations that you're working with, know where they are. I've been somebody who have always compared myself, compared whatever I do with the best. And you know, now that is where you start. Leave the first world, but look at all the developing nations. We are supposed to be part of the so-called BRICS nation.
Mr. Obi, we'll take a short break now. We'll take a short commercial break, and then we'll come back and you tell us about this comparison with best practices elsewhere. We'll take a short break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. It's still The Morning Show. You're still watching The Morning Show here on the Arise News channel. And we still have with us Mr. Peter Obi, former governor of Anambra State and vice presidential candidate on the platform of the People's Democratic Party of Nigeria during the 2019 general election. Before we went on break, Laila had asked you a question about the social investment program of this administration. And you had said, where is the budget to run it? And that, you know, we should compare what we have with what happens, best practices elsewhere. So is it that you have a problem with the 2020 budget as proposed?
Is it people are talking about 2020 budget? And how much was it? 10-point-something trillion?
Yes, 10.3.
You know, Nigerians don't even look, we don't look at the problem. The problem is that everybody's arguing, where are we going to get this, where are we going to get it? You haven't even looked at the quantum of the budget compared with the size of the country. Ruben, I've made a studies of about 24 countries, and I've followed it religiously. And I'll give you a very quick example of what is happening. Let's use the BRICS nation and the Mint nation. The BRICS nation, of course, you know, are Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. And the Mint is, of course, Mexico.
We're hoping that
India.
Nigeria.
No, Nigeria is there. Nigeria is there because it's Mexico, Indonesia, Nigeria, Turkey. Of all these countries, none will you see that their budget is less than 15% of their GDP, except us. Ours is a case you cannot imagine. Brazil is a population of 210 million people. With a GDP of about 2 trillion, their budget is $800 billion. That is 40% of their GDP. Russia is 145 million. With 1.5 trillion GDP, their budget is 300 billion. That's 20%. India, with a population of 1.3 billion, their GDP is 2.6 trillion, Their budget is $780 billion. That is about 20-something% of their GDP. China, with 1.4 billion population, a GDP of 12 trillion, their budget is 3.8 trillion. That is almost 30% of their budget. South Africa, which is supposed to be second, with a population of 55 million people, a GDP of 370, their budget is $110 billion. You go to Mexico. Mexico has 127 million in population. The budget of their GDP is $1.1 trillion. Their budget is $315 billion. Indonesia, with a population of 250, a GDP of 1.2 trillion, their budget is 180 billion. Nigeria, with a budget, with a population of 200 million people, a GDP called it 400 billion, their budget for 2018, I'm using 2018, their budget is $22 billion. 22. Turkey, the last country, is a country of 80 million people with a GDP of 850, their budget is 190. If you look at all these countries and share their budget with their population, India is the lowest before us, and that is about $600 per person. Followed by Indonesia at 700. The rest are above 2,000. Nigeria is $100. You have a crisis. And you're trying to pull 98 million. And of all these countries, you have the worst situation. Of all these countries, none of them have more than 5% of their people living under poverty. Not one of them. In your own case, you have 50% of your people living under poverty that you need to pull out. And your budget is that low. In fact, this budget of 2020 that we are clapping and shouting about is not up to the budget of education for Indonesia, a comparative country. Indonesia's budget for education is 40 billion. This is 30-something billion. Yeah, so you have a crisis. So you need to look at what are these people doing that I'm not doing. That's where you start. You don't just sit and say, hey, wait a minute. Look at this country like Vietnam. 95 million people, a GDP of about 300. Their budget is $75 billion. And you have 30 billion for 20, not even for this year. And you're doing this. This is what I've been saying. Let us look at what people are doing. You have the worst in education. You have 13 million people out of school. If you look at your budget for 10 years for education, our 10 years budget for education in this country is 4.4 trillion. If you share it with 305, which is our rate today, is $14.4 billion.
So where do you see this going in terms of the 2020 budget and how it's going to affect our already fragile economy?
I'm already telling you that even that thing you think is big is empty in itself. To even worsen it is that you cannot fund that budget.
But isn't all of this relative to revenue? Because, Nigeria, we say revenue, diversifying our revenue base. And isn't that why the president, for example, went to the National Assembly this time with a fiscal strategy bill? And then again, there's also
to do what?
Well, to raise more revenue.
From
to
where?
See how...
From where?
VAT.
Ruben, yes. Raising revenue all over the world is very simple. When you talk about revenue, everybody in my village knows what to do. Their problem is capital. That is what Nigeria descended to. Where we're talking about, United people say, our problem is revenue to GDP. Our problem is that the revenue is like a bank account. You cannot talk about withdrawal without paying anything in. Otherwise, you're trying to steal somebody's money. The only way to create and make revenue to increase is to build your economy, get your people employed. The more people are employed, the more revenue you can create. It's a very simple thing. I'll give you an example from another country. For example, very simple. You have 98 million people living below poverty. Your total tax, total people who are paying tax today is about 20 million. That's saying the figure should be between 40 and 50. If you put 40 people here out of poverty, you put them here. That's what happens everywhere. In China, for example, SME, which is what we are starting here, does not only contribute 60% of their GDP, they now do 80% of the employment. As at my latest report of this year, they now do 80%. 800 million people are employed in China. Go and check the 80%, what is going to be. It's almost, you're talking about almost 700. Now, what is even more important, they provide almost 80% of the revenue. China lives only, supports their annual budget based on taxes. 80% of their this comes from tax. 80% of 3.8 trillion is about 3 trillion. SME provide 50% of that, 1.5 trillion. How much do they do here? You can't go and be taxing people. Are you going to tax jobless people? We're already taxing the businesses that are collapsing. The businesses are collapsing by the day. You need to look at what people are doing. We do this as if it's rocket science. It's not rocket science.
What's your take on the debt to GDP ratio? I mean, I know many Nigerians say, debt to GDP ratio is a problem. But government officials say, in fact, we should borrow more because we don't, we have not borrowed enough.
Let me tell you, Ruben, I spoke on 2017 on the platform on issue of debt. I spoke here. There's nothing wrong with debt.
Okay, maybe we'll take a short break, again, a short commercial break, and then when we return, you'll comment on the country's debt to your GDP ratio. We'll be right back. It's still the morning show, and we still have with us here Peter Obi, Vice Presidential Candidate of the PDP in the 2019 general election. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. You're still watching the morning show here on the Arise News channel. And still with us in the studio is Peter Obi, former governor of Anambra State, former Vice Presidential Candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Nigeria.
That's Mr. Peter Obi would do.
No, but I mean, we have to contextualize it so that our viewers will know who you are. Now, we've been talking about the economy, and you say the Nigerian economy is in crisis. We talked about the budget. You said the budget doesn't look too good. We talked about revenue. You say we have a revenue crisis because we're taxing the poor. And I said, why don't we just keep borrowing? Since the officials say debt to GDP ratio is still very low and we still have a window to borrow more.
Ruben, like I said before, I spoke about debt in 2017. But because I'm just a trader, I'm not an economist, I'm not even working World Bank, nobody will listen to me. Ruben, our debt is toxic. We're borrowing for wrong reasons. There's nothing wrong in borrowing. If we're borrowing for production, if your debt is productive, you don't have a problem. If you're borrowing for consumption, you have a crisis because you can't pay it. And that is why we're having a problem today. And I give you a simple narration of it. Even the best of countries in the world are borrowing. Let me not say the man who is owing highest, which is Japan, because people will say, oh, I always use Japan and China. Let me use a smaller country. Let me use a country we even refer to every day when people talked about the best country that moved from third world to first world. Is it not Singapore? Mm-hmm. Singapore debt to GDP today is 110%. This is government, public borrowing. In fact, the overall borrowing is about 400%. But debt to GDP of public debt in Singapore is 100%. Ruben, yet all international rating agencies rate them AAA. Why? In Singapore, it's in their constitution. You cannot borrow except to invest in a capital project that can pay itself back.
And that's why when they got their independence in 1965 as a poor country, look at where they are today.
That's what I'm saying. You can only invest their money there. The consequence is that all the money they are owing, they can pay. So it is not affecting their GDP. Because of it today, look at Singapore that is owing 110%. Their per capita is 64,000. And they're owing 110%. You who is owing 20, your per capita is actually below 2,000. I give you another country. So it is not borrowing that is the problem. It's what you do with the borrowing. Our borrowing, because we are not investing it, that is what is not impacting on our growth. It's not impacting on our per capita or anything. In fact, the more we borrow, the more we are going down, which means we're borrowing for consumption. Let me use a country that is outside all this country to give you an example of what borrowing can do and the impact. Vietnam. I don't want to use because if Singapore is 5 million, Vietnam is 95 million. In 2010, Vietnam borrowing was about the level where we are today. They're now about 50. In 2010, their GDP was 116 billion. Their per capita is 1,300. By 2015, their GDP have moved to 190 billion. Their per capita have moved to 2,050. Today, their GDP is 240. Their per capita have moved to 2,550. What is that country doing? They have no oil. Their GDP is supported about 49% by services, 30-something% by manufacturing, and 17% by agriculture. What is it? Is an economy that has an impressive record that is fueled by a strong domestic demand. Because your people have to have money to buy goods first, and strong manufacturing export-led economy. In our own, in 2010, our GDP was 367, and our per capita was 2,000. In 2015, our GDP moved to almost 500. Our per capita was 2,500. 2018, our GDP is under 400, and our per capita is 1,920. And we're borrowing more money. So the more we're borrowing, the reason why it's not impacting is because and that is why you're spending a huge amount to service the debt. Like you just talked about 2020 debt. Look at the amount you're even providing.
A quarter of the budget for debt service.
No, that is even imaginary. It will be more. Because if you look at look at it, in 2018, your total income was 3-point-something trillion. And you now say you're going to get about 8 trillion from where?
And what you mentioned while you were covering that analysis, you mentioned investments and how we're also not really investing in the right things. And really and truly, Nigeria's greatest resource is our human capital. And the lack of investment in human capital will continue to be an issue. Now, in our past, our current president brought up a point once stating that Nigerian youths are lazy, and it's something that went viral. It's something that got a lot of people aggrieved. It wasn't even seen as funny because of how hard-working Nigerian youths have to be under these conditions. Then recently, a member of the Presidential Economic Advisory Council and someone who also ran against you in the past, Professor Soludo, came out to say that Nigerian youths are illiterate and we cannot continue to export illiterates, in certain words. What is your take on the way in which Nigerian youths are envisioned in Nigeria today, considering the fact that the average age of a Nigerian citizen today is 18 years old, and we have this massive population that is continuously dehumanized when we have conditions that we cannot control?
Let me tell you one thing I have to start with. Nigerians belong to a class of most intelligent sort of human beings on the surface of the earth. I've been all over the world. I've been to various schools all over the world. Nigerians are very intelligent, very smart. You know, you cannot classify a people you have not given opportunity. The Nigerian youths, we have not invested in them. We've not given them opportunity. I'm a trader. All these young people that came from my village in this Lagos to do business are doing well today. Some of them in production, in manufacturing, you know, all sorts of things. They're doing very well. When you've not given them opportunity, you have not invested in them. I've just given you an example of our schools. That our 10 years budget for education, is exactly 10 years in dollar terms, my dear, is $14.4 billion.
Sounds a bit
10 years.
criminal. It's so
right?
Good. Yeah.
South Africa, 1 year is 17 billion. And they're supposed to be the second economy. We're number one. In fact, if you combine our education budget and health budget in the same 10 years, two of them came to about total of about 7 trillion, which is just about $20 billion. It's just about what Vietnam is budgeting for education. So in 1 year, and this is 10 years. So when you look at this, you have not invested in this youth. You have not, the drivers of the economy all over the world today are micro, small, medium enterprises. All countries of the world, they control, in China, they control 95% of all the enterprises. In Indonesia, 97%. In Vietnam, 98%. And who are these people? They are the youths. They have invested in them. To just give you an example of, look at the country's overall borrowing from banks. As at March this year, it was a total of 15.5 trillion, out of which about 4,000 major companies owe or borrowed 13.3. Our entire SME of 35 million people, 35 million, the lending to them is only 500 billion. Less than 5%, or about 5% of the entire total sum. If you divide among them, it's about 22,000. It cannot work. In China, there's a policy that 20 to 25% of the lending must go to MSMEs. The consequence is that the total debt stock of China today, is about how much? 30 trillion. They're getting 7.5 trillion. In Nigeria, they are getting only about 22. It's impossible. They can't compete with 2-point-something billion dollars when the counterpart. So if you look at what is happening globally, it cannot work. The youths, Nigerian youths, are hardworking. Nigerian youths are one of the most productive. We need to encourage them. We need to support them.
Quite correct, Mr.
It's very simple.
Quite correct. But let's take on a number of topical issues before we end this conversation. And I'm looking at the front page of This Day Today, this story. We discussed it earlier before you joined us. Governors to demand state's share of federation account in dollars. Now, these governors, when they are not looking for naira, they are looking for dollars. They're asking for money. And, you know, my own point is about lack of accountability and productivity in the states. Do you think that this is a legitimate demand? They are again asking for removal of fuel subsidy, or what the Jonathan administration called the deregulation of the downstream sector. When the Jonathan administration attempted it, many of these governors, they ran away. They could not own up, and they were the ones that proposed it at the time. And it's good to see the Buhari administration saying, no, that's not a good suggestion. And then they're also saying the local councils do not exist as a third tier of government, that there are only 2 tiers. I'd like you to comment on each of these issues.
Let me start with the tiers of government. That local government does not exist. In terms of tiers of government, if it's a federating unit, they are correct. But even in America, where there's a federating unit, where there's a typical, for example, there's mayors. So within the states, there's need to create those status. That's part of what we have probably as our local governments and everything. It has to show the local governance. These are critical. So it's not out of place. You know, it might be silent, it might not exist, but it's still there. Then, on issue of subsidy, I'm somebody who believes that we shouldn't have subsidy at all. Ruben, what we are paying for subsidy is inefficiency. Quote me anywhere. If they give me the calculation of what we're paying in subsidy, we shouldn't be paying it. What we're paying in subsidy, Ruben, is a situation where we're paying for demurrage, we're paying for inefficiency in the port, we're paying for inefficient transportation. But even to tell you what we're paying, Ruben, I have a friend, and we did this study, empirical studies. My friend lives there's a city in India where he lives. And from where he lives to where he drives on the express road every day is about 250 kilometers.
Mr. Obi, hold your thoughts there. Let's go on another quick commercial break, and as soon as we're back, the conversation, of course, continues. Stay with us. Welcome back. You are still watching the morning show here on Arise News, and still in the studio with us is Mr. Peter Obi, discussing a range of issues based on the states of the nation. Thank you, sir, for staying with us. Now, before we went on a break, you were speaking about the removal of subsidy and something that you're in accordance with. And then we'd also, of course, like you to comment further on the governors demanding state shares of federation accounts in dollars.
Let me go back. I didn't finish the subsidy issue. Half of I had a friend who travels about a place where that is about 235 to 250 kilometers. That's where his office is. He goes, because he works from home, he visits the office 3 times in a week. And it takes him above 3 hours to drive there. He's never done more than 3 hours. He pays a toll on a good road of about equivalent of about 1,500 naira to go there. In terms of consumption, his car, it consumes about 16 liters of fuel. Going from here to Ibadan, from Lagos to Ibadan, is 130 kilometers. I can assure you that I have also friends who come from Ibadan to Lagos. They are not sure how many hours it will take them. I'm sure you can agree with that. So some days it will be 2.5, some days it will be 5, some days it will be 6. All those subsidy we're paying is for all those time we're on the road. It's just like people saying issue of toll gates. Nobody's against toll gates. Go everywhere in the world. Go everywhere in Spain, in Italy, in Malaysia. There's toll everywhere. Well, let's have a good road. If I'm sure that a trip to Ibadan, which is 130 kilometers, is going to take me the normal time, which shouldn't be more than 1 hour, 20 minutes. And you're asking me to pay you 1,000 on a good road, which will make my car better and everything. The money I'm going to save, even when I don't pay subsidy on fuel efficiency, will compensate for all this. Above all, for health reasons. I can tell you that you said today Nigerians have a life expectancy of 54. If you know what people go through, health issues by this traffic problem we have in this country, you won't believe it. I have somebody who have traveled from here to Benin. By the time he got to Benin, he landed in hospital. And when I asked him what happened, he said, listen,
well,
going here...
You could have ended up in the mortuary.
By the time they took them 10 hours, going here, doing this, the roads is not good, everything and all that. And these are what people are going through. I've had somebody who had had issue with the wife because he was traveling on a bad road in Nigeria. He was stuck at almost 11 p.m. on a bad road where he doesn't know where they're going because the place is stuck. And the wife phoned and said, oh, well, are you missing me? He just dropped the phone. And he shouted on the other side where the person was sitting. He said, look at this woman. I'm missing myself. And he's talking about what I'm missing her. But I don't even know where I am. These are issues. Yeah. The wife doesn't know what he's going through. The person who was with him knows what he's going through. So when they start having issue in the family, it was this person coming to explain, oh, please, I was there. Look at where we are. These are health issues. So we shouldn't. On the issue of what you're talking about, dollar, is, for me, is because we have multiplicity of windows. So everybody now wants to turn where I can get more money. What we need to do is to agree that this is the rate of dollar to the naira. Yeah. You know, if you have 3 windows, you can find a medium place like the wholesale rate of 345 and say, this is what they're going to get. So everybody knows that this is the rate. But for us to now dollarize the economy, you're creating additional confusion. It won't be. And above all, I keep saying it, we are always talking about sharing, sharing, sharing. We must move this thing from sharing to what? Creating, production. Let's talk about how can we get more money. What other people are doing, Vietnam is not sharing any money. China is not sharing any. These people are not sharing money. People are creating wealth on their own. You said it, our biggest resource,
human capital.
It's human capital. Let's invest in it. We don't need to go, nobody needs to go to anywhere to share money. The money we're sharing today from oil is a diminishing asset that is becoming obsolete. Oil did not save Venezuela. We have 10 times more reserves than us. It's not going to save us. Countries are investing in intellectual economy, not this baggage economy that we're carrying here and people are talking about sharing.
We'll soon run out of time. You must have seen me checking my phone occasionally. I try to see if we're getting some feedback from the viewers. Now, 2 questions that people have put forward. They've said, 1, do you think that there is a possibility of an able presidency in 2023, now that Nigerians are already talking about 2023? And then 2, somebody sent in a text saying, well, Mr. Peter Obi has given us a lot of statistics, a lot of comparison, a lot of best practices. But given our own reality in Nigeria, what are your specific recommendations as to the way forward for Nigeria?
Well, let me start with the second one again.
Yes.
I'm not just giving statistics. That's where I'm on.
No, I'm just quoting feedback.
Ruben, I've practiced this. When I went to Anambra State, we didn't have any form of savings or anything. We had 35 billion outstanding in pension and gratuity. We had people who were owing. My predecessor wasn't owing any contractor. He paid their contractors. He paid salaries. So he wasn't owing salaries. But I can say that, Ruben, we started from the scratch and was able to clear off all this pension and gratuity. We were not owing anybody. As at the day I left office, and I challenge anybody, I wasn't owing pension, I wasn't owing gratuity, I wasn't owing any contractor for goods supplied or anything. And I had clearly $156 million, 25 billion naira in cash, and 25 billion naira investment. So it is something I practice. So I can say it can work here. What are the practical ways to do it? Is to look at what the other nations are doing. They are investing in their people, in those youths. You see those youths you're calling lazy and illiterate, they are our assets. There's nothing, some of them are educated. People say, oh, they're not educated in science, they're not educated in this. Let me tell you, even all this thing we are shouting, the founder of Apple, Steve Jobs, did not go to university. So let us not say, oh, well, they must go to this thing. No. He didn't go to Igbo. He was even sent out of the secondary school that he's not doing well. Bill Gates did not go to university. He left university. So let us not go. Gucci, that we are celebrating this thing, was a hotel porter in London, in this hotel. He's a porter who went to show this thing. So all this, even WhatsApp that we just started, is an immigrant driver who just, so these things were started. Let's invest in these lazy youths. Let's invest in these illiterate youths. Then we cannot tag them after we find out they cannot do anything. You cannot go to your village and bring somebody and be starving him. What we have now, Ruben, the cumulative, what we see today, where you see terrorism, kidnapping, this is the cumulative effect of leadership failure over the years. If they start to starve all of us here now, without money, without food, we become terrorists. Simple. Let's invest in them first. Let's deal with them. Just like we are talking about source of revenue to GDP being low. I've told you, even at that, before we talk about revenue to GDP being low, let's talk about cost of governance. Our cost of governance is unacceptable. Look at what we are paying, look at what we are costing. Ruben, let me just give you one example before you run out of time. Nebraska is a unicameral. Listen, well, I live with them.
Yeah, you talk about. But I want you to talk about the Igbo presidency. Presidency.
Let me tell you about the Igbo presidency and the way I see it. At the end of the day, Ruben, it is only fair that if you live in a system with other people that treat you fairly. That's where you start. Today, are Igbos being fairly treated in Nigeria? No. Yeah. Capital, no. And I can give you instances and everything and all that. And unless you bring inclusive government, where I think these people are included, are given opportunity as other people, we're not doing well. For me, the fundamental thing first is that let's restructure the country and make it more competitive. It is far more important, I'm sure, to everybody than the Igbo presidency. Igbo presidency, even with this structure, might not do that. However, I believe there's quite a number of people who have the capacity that can change this country. There's nothing in changing this country. As far as I'm concerned, I say it's as easy as ABC. It's just that our process of selecting people is faulty. In China, you start from local government to state, people will see your track record. What happens here is that somebody just comes from the blues and speaking grammar, and we're listening to him. When Clinton became president of America, they looked at what he did in Arkansas. When Bush was talking, I remember the campaign, they said, this man delivered here. Let us see what people are doing. Let us see people who have capacity, who understands what it needs to create a new economy. It is not by gangsters, it's not by shouting, it's not by what we do now is a world show. We've turned the whole country into a Nollywood theater. So everybody is going, people say, oh, did you hear that this man is getting mad? Didn't you hear this? That shouldn't be our problem. Our problem is how do we pull 98 million people out of poverty?
I don't think we could agree on that point.
Yeah, but before we go, will you run for president in 2023, yes or no?
Well, Ruben, what is important for me now is how do we reflect this economy and put these 98 million people out of poverty.
Thank you
Otherwise,
very much.
it will consume all of us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Peter Obi. I mean, so many questions from our viewers, but we've been able to take just a few. I'm sure we'll have another opportunity.